Hi there, my name is Bill Schwab and I'd like to welcome you back to the Northlight Photographic Workshops. I'm coming to you today from the Photostock studio in beautiful northern Michigan, where I'm going to show you how to make a platinum print. But before I get down to that, I'd like to thank you all for following along so far. I'm only 3 videos into that with this one, and I'm completely amazed at the response so far. I had no idea there were so many people out there that I didn't know that were into these processes, and I'm really happy that you're enjoying them so far. And if you are, please give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already subscribed, please press the subscribe button, and it'll keep you informed of upcoming videos, that kind of thing. So now, before I get down to the materials and the different steps of the process, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about safety. We're going to be working with some caustic chemicals, so what I would really like is that you just get some nitrile gloves and some safety glasses from Home Depot before you attempt these kind of things at home. Different photographic chemicals are somewhat dangerous, and it's best to be safe. That's all I can say. Now, what we're going to need in this process is, of course, paper. I'm working with Hannemuhle paper today. This is a Hannemuhle platinum rag. It's a very versatile paper in the alternative photographic processes. It's a relatively new paper, and they've been wonderful enough to develop it for platinum palladium printers. It's somewhat of an acidic paper, so we don't have to pre-treat it. Now, when I say pre-treating, I'll get to that in another video in the future. But for now, we're just going to use this nice Hannemuhle platinum rag that came out of the package, and I'd like to thank them for giving me some support and giving me some paper to work with in my workshops and in these videos and things. The next thing we're going to need is a good brush. Now, I like to use a Richeson brush. A lot of people use this brush. We call it the magic brush. It's a synthetic brush, and it has very soft bristles. And this brush here I've had for going on 20 years now that I've used it. It's a beautiful brush, and it helps with a nice smooth coat of your emulsion. Another good thing that you're going to need is a pencil. Now, that pencil is to mark out our paper so that we know where to brush our platinum on when we're brushing it on the surface of the paper. The other thing that we're going to need is a contact printer. Now, a contact printer is a pretty simple device. It's like a picture frame with a springed back, and that helps you put together the negative with the paper and expose it to the light in the UV box. Now, the other thing that we're going to need, as I mentioned, is a negative. Now, today we're going to be using a digital negative. You can use an in-camera negative, but I'm not going to be doing that for this purpose. I have a curve built that matches the process that we're going to be working with, and therefore I don't really need to have any contrasting agents or anything in my solutions. All I need is a good negative, and that's what I have here. Another thing that we're going to need is our palladium chloride. Now, I mixed some palladium chloride in a previous video, and I'll put a link to that up here if you haven't already seen it or if you're going to need it. Now, you can buy this stuff from Bostick and Sullivan already pre-mixed, but as I said, I have a video on mixing it up, and if you'd like that, you can click on the link up here. The other thing we're going to need is some ferric oxalate. Now, ferric oxalate is not something that I've talked about in the previous video, and you can mix it yourself. I'll get to that in another video coming up, but you can also buy this from Bostick and Sullivan pre-mixed. Now, what we're going to be doing is mixing equal amounts of those two chemicals in a shot glass. So it's good to have a shot glass. I have a favorite one I've been using for many years. And the last thing that we're going to need in the solution for the emulsion is tween. I like to use tween 20 or a polysorbate 20. And what tween is it's an emulsifier, and it helps the two chemicals that we're going to be using. It helps them mix together, and it also helps with the flow of those chemicals on the paper when you're painting out your emulsion on the paper. It gives you a nice even coat. So I do like to use the tween. Once we've developed our paper, we need to clear it, clear the unused palladium out of the paper. And for those, we use some clearing agents. I like to start with a disodium EDTA at a 2.5% solution. Then I like to go on to a sodium sulfite solution of 1%. And then from that, I always like to go to a tetrazodium EDTA solution of 2% for my final bath before I wash for 15 to 20 minutes. But we're going to be getting to all that on down the line. And for today's purposes, I'm not going to be using the tetrazodium EDTA just because I want to shorten the video, and basically you'll get the idea. The other thing that we're going to need is our developer. Now, I like to use potassium oxalate. You can also use ammonium citrate in the platinum and palladium process. but I like to use potassium oxalate as it is a little creamier, I believe, and a little less grainy than ammonium citrate. The potassium oxalate tends to be a little bit more caustic, a little more dangerous, so definitely use the gloves if you're going to be touching the solution. I recommend not touching the solution at all. I use a pair of tongs and I never put my fingers into the solution at all. So I highly recommend doing that as well, but I do know that some of you like to get down and dirty and get your hands wet. Don't get it wet with this unless you're wearing gloves. The last thing that you're going to need is a light table, and the light table is for registering your paper with your negative after you've painted on your emulsion, and also it helps you to mark your paper so that you know where you're going to be putting your emulsion on. So with that, let me think. I can't think of anything else that I need right now, and so let's just get down to it. It's going to be fun. What we're going to do first, before we get down to coating our paper, is to mark it. And the way that I mark the paper is I come over here to the light table, take the piece of paper that I'm going to be coating, and I take the negative that I'm going to be printing with. I lay the negative down on top of the light table, then I put the paper over the top of it. And that way I put it into the position that I want it to be in when it's finished. And generally, just like I frame, I put a little weighted to the bottom, a little less weighted to the top, and equal on the sides. So once I've got that set, I like to take just a regular number 2 pencil and very lightly take and mark the corners of the negative. I've got one corner marked, another corner marked. Come down and we'll mark this one, and then we'll mark this one. And now if I was going to do a rough edge like I said I was going to do earlier, I would just take this and use this as my guide, dump my Palladium in here and brush it out and try to keep it within those lines as much as possible. But I decided against that, and I'm going to show you a very abbreviated way of the way that I coat, where I mask it off. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm becoming more economical as this material gets more expensive. And when you overbrush, you're wasting Palladium. And when I contain myself with a mask, I know exactly how much I need, and I can keep myself within the lines quite nicely, and there's a lot less wasted if I'm just brushing cavalierly over the edge. Now, a lot of people like to do that because they think that gives them an aesthetic or it's a style or something. But, and you know, to each their own, but I like to do it the way that I like to do it, and that's what I'm going to show you right now. Now, I am going to do it a little bit more abbreviated in this video. I'll show you a little bit more advanced version of it in another one in the future, but for now, let's just get to it. So what I do is that I once again take my negative out, I turn off my light, now I can see my black marks, and then what I do is I take some mildly stick tape that won't harm my paper, and I just take and mark my lines across from my dots. And then I take the side and I do the same thing. And like I say, I'm just going quickly here for this purpose of this video, and we'll do something a little bit more involved in the future. So there, I've got 3 sides done. I come down to my final side here. And there I go. Now I've got the area that I'm going to coat in. You can't really see the tape right now. Now there's still some danger of me overbrushing in here. And another thing that I like to do is another special kind of painter's tape that I like to use. So I just take that and I put it along the edge. And that gives me a little bit more protection. Now you might ask why I wouldn't use this tape for everything. The reason being is that the glue on this tape isn't quite as good, and I don't get quite as nice a clean edge when I coat. So there I am. Now I have the paper ready to go. I'm ready to coat. And now what we'll do is we'll go on to the coating stage. And we're going to be mixing our ferric oxalate and our Palladium solutions in equal amounts in the shot glass, then pouring it out here on the paper and then brushing it in with the brush. Now, I like to use a wet brush when I'm doing this. I mean, not a wet brush, but a wet brush. So normally what I do is I get it a little bit off camera here. I'm dipping it into a little bit of distilled water. And then what I do is I take it on a piece of paper towel and I just lightly dab it. And then I just leave it at that. And now I'm ready to coat. And the reason that I do that is I like the brush to be moist so it doesn't also absorb all of my solution into the brush and not put it on the paper. So then I'll take my shot glass here and we will mix out equal amounts. So first my palladium chloride solution, And I know how much I'm going to need to cover here. I'm going to need about 1/2 of a milliliter, a little bit more than 1/2 of a milliliter. Now a milliliter would be 20 drops, and because I'm using equal drops of each of the palladium and the ferric oxalate, that would be 10 drops each. I want a little less than that. I'm going to do, because I know from experience doing this print that it's about 6 drops. So I'm going to take out, and this is my palladium chloride, I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 drops. Then I carefully put the lid on and I set that aside. Then I'm going to pick up my ferric oxalate. Now ferric oxalate, you can see on the camera here, there's a little bit of a yellow, kind of a straw yellow color to it. Now we're going to put 6 drops of that in as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now what we've got here is a light-sensitive solution that is sensitive under UV light. And that's the beauty of this process. You can work it under it in what's known as a dim room. You know, there is a little bit of UV light in the fluorescence that I'm using for the photography here, so I'm hoping that that's not going to fog me. But normally you can work under just regular incandescent light. As long as there's no windows around or no UV light spilling in from outside, you're fine. So it's a great way to work because you can see while you're doing it. Now the third element I'll add here is my tween. And I'll just take out and I'm just going to put a couple of drops of tween in there. And then what I do is I shake it all around and I mix it all up so that the tween and the ferric oxalate and the palladium all mix together. Now you might have heard me talking about platinum palladium process. In my palladium, I use a contrasting agent that a lot of people use now called Na2, or sodium chloroplatinate. So it's adding basically into my base palladium solution. I usually add 20% solution. I'll add 1 drop for every 5 milliliters. And what that does is it gives a little higher contrast or a little bit of brightening. And that helps also a lot with the fogging that I was talking about on the edges. It just brightens up the palladium a little bit, but it does add a bit of platinum to it. So it technically becomes a platinum palladium process. So now I've got everything all mixed up. I'm ready to go. I'm going to dump it out here on my paper. And I like to just kind of let it drain out a little bit so I get it all. And then I'll start taking my brush and I'll start very carefully and very lightly brushing it in. And this is one of the ways that I like to do it. Other people might go with longer brush strokes, but because I'm working within a contained area, I know where I want my palladium to go and I'm masked so I can keep it right in there. So what I like to do is get the edges all done, make sure that the edges are coated really well, and then I'll start to coat through the paper like this. Got a little edge mat. And then I'll go the other direction. And then I'll go back the same direction. Now, I'm basically not putting any pressure on my brush at all. And you're going to learn this over time. You're going to have your own touch to it. But basically, I'm just letting the weight of the brush drag it through. And I'm trying to get the nicest, most even coating I can get, which I'm pretty much there right now. So that's my coating. I can just let it set to dry, or what I can also do is use a hair dryer, which is what I'll do off camera to dry this out so that we can go to the printing process. So with that, we'll move on to the next stage. Now if you can hear me, you can see that as I'm drying it, it gets a little bit of a darker yellow to it. And I've also already removed my masking tape, so you can see the area that I was coating is contained. Now that I'm done drying it, I'm going to want to take the negative that we've been working with and I'm going to put the negative on top of here, emulsion down. Now, normally I'll put this back onto the light table to use the light table to line this up, but I can kind of see through here. You probably can't, but I can see through. And I know that I'm covering the emulsion with my negative. So once I've got my negative in place, I take another piece of my low stick tape and I just mask it down here on the bottom so it sticks. And then what I do is I pull down my print frame. Now the print frame, I turn over, I open it up, and I take my emulsion and negative, put it face down because obviously this is the glass and that's where the light's going to be shining through. I place that inside of the contact printer. I close my springs back down, and then I'm ready to print. So now what I'll do is I'll go from here and I'll take this and put it into the contact printer. And I give on mine a 9-minute exposure. So that's what we'll set it up for. Now, what my burner is a homemade one, and it's easy enough to make your own. I'll put some reference to that in future videos. I'll maybe even put a link to it in the bottom of this one. But anyway, this is my, my plate burner, and it's basically 12 2-foot long UV bulbs inside of here. Now, what I'm going to do is do a 9-minute exposure here. So in it goes, and we'll go for 9 minutes. Now that our 9 minutes is up, we'll take our contact printer out and we'll take it over and pull the print out, and it's time to develop. Now, sometimes there's a latent image left after you peel off the negative and after it's burned in slightly, and you can see probably just a slight ghost image there. So now it's time to put it into the developer and get the grand reveal. First, I wanted to explain to you what were in these trays. Now, I had mentioned earlier that we have a potassium oxalate, which is going to go in this first tray. That's going to be our development tray. The second tray here, this is just plain clear water, and I'm going to use that as a rinse in between each step along here, and then for my final wash. The next tray here is a 2.5% solution of disodium EDTA. And in the second tray here, I have a 1% solution of sodium sulfite. Now, in a later video, I'll give you a little lesson in mixing percentages, that kind of thing, but that's not really the important thing right now. I just wanted to let you know what's in these trays. Now, normally I would also use a third tray with tetrasodium EDTA in it at about a 2% solution as well before I went to my final wash. But just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to use the 2 baths and the final wash. Now, another thing about the potassium oxalate here is that it's the development, the longer you leave the print in, it doesn't get any darker, it doesn't develop any better. It's pretty much development on contact. And you want to kind of cover the sheet as fast as possible, because sometimes you can get some flow lines or those kind of things in prints. I haven't had any problems with it for a long time, but what I tend to do is lay the paper and the print out in the tray first, and then unscrew the cap of the developer and pour it on really quickly. Now, the other thing is about this process, it's kind of an acidic process. So this is a little bit more of an acidic formula, and just that fact helps clear the unused palladium. So I tend to leave it in the developer a little bit longer, just to help it start to clear before it goes into the first rinse and then goes into the first clearing bath. So anyway, here we go. Let's have some fun with this here. This is the image that we've already printed. I'm going to drop that down in here, and then I'm going to try to get out of the way of the cameras here and do the big reveal when I pour on the developer. Now, I'm going to pour it on quite fast, so here we go. And there you can see our image. Worked out nice. Nice exposure. Now, I don't know how well you can see, but you can also see the unused palladium that maybe went over the edges here start to clear a little bit more. Now you can see there's still a little bit more of a yellow cast, and the longer that I leave it here in the development, that yellow cast will disappear. And it's just about ready to go over to the next. I'll go through the rinse, a first rinse first before I take it over to the first clearing bath. And I do that just to clear out the potassium oxalate that's not rinsed off or hasn't drained off the paper. So there we go. Now I'm going to drop it into my first clearing bath, which is the disodium EDTA. And there, I'll just let it sit there for a bit and clear. Now, what I tend to do is I leave it in each bath for about 10 minutes. Some people go 15 minutes. It just depends on your clearing times and how much it takes to really get the unused palladium out of the paper. So there, about 10 minutes has elapsed, and I am now going to move the print on over into the next clearing bath after I do another quick rinse. So now we go over into the sodium sulfite. Now the reason that I go with sodium sulfite on such a dilute scale is that it tends to, if you leave it in there too long, it tends to leach out your image a little bit. So your image will actually lighten a little bit if you've got too much sodium sulfite in your solution. So I just go with a 1% solution. Now, and I'll also leave this in for about another 10 minutes. And then when I'm done, we'll drop it into the wash water. And the final wash, I like to go from anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes. So we'll give that another 10 minutes. Okay, so our 10 minutes is up. Now I'm going to take it over and put it back into the rinse water tray. I'm going to give it a good rinse. A rinse and dump a couple of times. And then I'll just leave it, cut back the water a little bit, and now I'm just going to give it about a 10-minute wash. I actually gave it a little bit longer, about 15 minutes, and I think it's time to hang this print up to dry. Now to dry them, I just have a simple clothesline in the darkroom and clothespins. I just hang it up, just like any other prints. Depending on how dry the air is, it takes anywhere from a half hour to an hour for them to dry. Now, a little bit of curl can happen to them afterward, and if you lay them under some heavy books, and what I like to do is put them into a dry mount press under heat for a short amount of time, and that will flatten them out quite beautifully. You'll see that at the end. So we're just going to let this dry here, and then I'll come back and we'll wrap up this video. I hope you've had some fun with this. So there you go. We've made a platinum print together today. I hope you had a good time. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll try this yourself at home. Again, you're going to find the links below to all of the different materials that we've used and how you find them yourself. I do want you to be careful using the chemistry, of course. Basically, I just want to thank you for following along. This has been such a great time, and I'm really enjoying making these videos. And I'd like to still try to get one out a week if I can, but if not, you know that I'm out here still working on it. This one was quite involved and it took me quite a bit of time. So if you liked it, please, again, give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. And please come back again. Watch for your subscription notices and you'll see when I post. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll have a great day. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.